And these two guys come up to me from Italy. And I said, how did you guys, how are you? This is this purpose conference. And I got to speak Italian to him for about 10 minutes. It was fabulous.
You speak Italian? Hey everyone, how you doing? Welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives in the world's leading global brands. I felt a bit of energy on this Friday, so I thought, who can I rope in to do a live stream with on LinkedIn? So I literally called up Chester Elton, who's my good friend, and here we are. So if you don't know who Chester is, he's the author of the best-selling books, Anxiety at Work, Leading with Gratitude. He's also an executive coach. He's also my coach. He's a LinkedIn influencer and host of the Anxiety at Work podcast. Welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing great. You know, it is so funny. You and I were talking earlier. I've got a day that is just back to back to back to back to back. And I had this one slot open at noon. And you said, do you want to do a live show? I go, live show with Chris Rainey.
Let's do it.
Absolutely, let's do it.
I love it. And then behind, like, we frantically set up the camera. We've got to make sure the mic's working. Chester's like, is this okay? I'm like, no, Chester, I know you got a fancy camera. Get the fancy camera out for me. I need the fancy, good-looking version as well. But anyway, how you been? Let's just start there. How are you?
You know, I've been great. And thanks for asking, actually. You know, through all the pandemic, you know, you made that amazing shift to digital and put on such phenomenal conferences. And because of that, and because of your gracious invitation for me to be on some of those panels, you know, I've really made some wonderful friends, you know, in the HR world and literally around the world. Well, now people are so desperate to get together.
Yeah.
And so Adrian and I have been speaking live every week, 2-3 times a week, you know, in Miami. I was telling you, I was just at Notre Dame. We were down in the panhandle of Florida. You know, we've been traveling around. And what to me is so fun, Chris, is people, when they get together, it's just different, right? There's a vibe there. There's more body language. There's the little conversations aside as you're going to get your coffee or you eat lunch together. And the joy of people being together is wonderful to see. Now, I will tell you that I was talking to my wife last night. I got in, you know, late from South Bend, Indiana. We had this fabulous conference at the football stadium at Notre Dame. And I said, you know, I forgot how much I miss this, being with people. And, you know, I grew up in Canada. You know, we've got an English, you know, heritage. The thing is, my family, we're huggers, we're kissers, we slap. We should have been
Why
Italian.
is no one surprised?
But seriously, we should have been Italian. And now I get to go do that. And it's just joyful. And I'm with you, Chris. There's something about this Friday that was just very energizing for me.
Yeah.
And having the chance to talk to you is the cherry on top.
Talking about that, I feel like it's only right that I introduce you to our new producer, Bruno. So he's in the background. He doesn't know I'm about to say this, but Bruno, I'd like to introduce you to Chester. Chester, Bruno. How are you, Bruno?
Hi, very well, thank you.
He's live on LinkedIn. How was your first week? He's just joined us, Chester. How was your first? Don't say anything naughty. No, I'm only joking. I'm joking. How was your first week?
Chris is a terrible boss. Just joking. It's amazing.
As well. So he's going to be making us look good and sound good. And it's nice to have someone in the studio actually with me, which is why I mentioned that in person and to collaborate and meet up. But to the sort of title of this episode, why do you think that people have been kind of on the flip side of what you just mentioned? Many people are finding it really tough, and there's a lot of anxiety about going back to work. I'd love to hear kind of what you've been hearing from your clients and especially the feedback from your book.
You know, great question. And of course, Adrian and I, over the pandemic, took a deep dive on specifically anxiety at work. And the reason for that, for the both of us, is we had children that suffered from severe anxiety growing up. So for us, it's not only part of how do you create a great culture, which is our mission in life. It was very personal for us. And you're right, this pent-up anxiety, all this change, monumental, global change on how we do business, how we relate to each other, how we even, touch each other, right? We talk about hugging and so on. There's still a lot of people who go, yeah, no, not yet. I'm not ready for that yet. Saw a wonderful presentation of a woman yesterday. She has freelance nurses and trying to bring joy back into healthcare, the trauma that healthcare workers went through.
Can imagine.
Seeing so much death. I mean, the PTSD and so on. So that anxiety level, the number one cause for anxiety in the workplace, and you and I have talked about this, Chris, is uncertainty. When you're not really sure about what's in the future, and you've got those moments that can cause, almost debilitating anxiety. Mm-hmm. I've got a friend shared with me recently. They're trying to buy a house. If you've ever tried to buy a house, that's trauma. There's a lot of anxiety there.
Definitely.
So this idea of how do we help each other deal with that? Well, it comes down to try to mitigate that uncertainty. How is the company doing? Where are we going? And how do I fit in that scheme? What's my role? And by the way, it's constant assurance. It just can't say, hey, I told you 2 months ago, you're doing great, right? That checking in, that constant checking in, and not just the boss, by the way. If you see coworkers that are suffering from that, just pull them aside. And by the way, you don't say, man, Bruno, it's your first week, you're anxious. I can tell you check all the boxes, right? You don't do that. You come in and say, hey, I've noticed that you're struggling a little bit with this assignment. Can I help?
Yeah.
Because when you say I've noticed, it's interpreted as I care. Isn't that interesting? Now, do you find that to be the case? The more you communicate with your staff and lower that uncertainty, they can breathe and they feel just a little bit better about work?
100%. And especially with how quickly things are moving. But I like the way you sometimes add so much value without realizing, Chester. But that point, I want to really stop for a second and talk about the language that you use. I noticed because you could just say, I see you're really anxious.
Yeah.
But, that's not going to help.
What's up with that?
Yeah, exactly, right. And then immediately the defense goes straight up, right? As opposed to, I noticed that, which really shows that you care and you paid attention. And that's something that I don't think I did a great job as before. And many of us just don't have the language. I think as leaders, managers, being able to equip them with that language to be able to have these conversations is huge. And does it come natural?
Well, leadership, as you well know, HR leaders, leadership is a journey, and you need to invest in that leadership journey, right? It's practice. It's like anything else. You were, doing all your breakdancing and playing hockey and stuff. When did you feel less anxious? Well, when you put in the reps. And I love that word reps. You've got a presentation to make. Well, I rehearsed it 10 times. I got in my reps. I'm going to feel good about this, right? You go into a game. We've practiced this play over and over and over again. We've put in the reps. And so the language that you use, of course, it comes with practice. Yeah, the more definitely. You do it, the better you get.
How do we spot anxiety? What are some of the things that we should look for?
Great question, because I will tell you that top achievers in particular are really good at hiding it, right? Yeah. And we hide it for a lot of reasons. One is there's still a huge stigma on mental health. If you came to work and you had a broken leg, people would say, oh, Chris, take care of that. Anxiety is that silent, is that invisible broken leg. And so how do you spot it? Changes in behavior. And we have actually a list in the book. We say, look, somebody who's never late starts showing up late or not at all. Somebody who never loses their temper. Somebody who's, usually very engaged is now withdrawn. Now look, everybody has a bad day, right? There's one-offs. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about that. It starts to continue. We talk about anxiety is that persistent worry. Well, I love that word persistent. If someone who is normally engaged is more withdrawn persistently, if someone who's never late starts showing up late and it's persistent, that's a clue that you can start the conversation and that language of, hey, I've just noticed. And then the follow-up question, I think, is just as important. I've noticed, what can I do to help? So you're offering help. It's not just, I've noticed you're a train wreck.
See you next week. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Great.
By the way, take care of that. It's, I've noticed, and can I help? Now you've got another important element that we talk about dealing with anxiety. You've created an ally. Now we're in this together. You're struggling. You need some help. I'm here to help. Well, now, now we've identified it. We've offered help. I care. Take a deep breath. Let's work through this together. It's kind of cool the way it works together, isn't it?
100%. And something that we hear a lot about now is leading with empathy. We're seeing this in the top sort of leadership skills now. It wasn't there, 5 years ago. Leading with empathy, never heard anyone talk about that. Why is leading with empathy so important, and how do we go about doing that? Again, something that doesn't really come natural to many leaders.
Yeah, I mean, as always, Chris, great question, and very insightful, because to your point, 5 years ago, Adrian and I have been studying leadership for 22 years now. And if you'd asked me 5 years ago, the attributes of a great leader would be great communicator, visionary, motivator, and so on. And you're right. Right now, it's empathy. And if you don't have that, none of that other stuff matters. And it comes back to those two words, I care. If you don't care about me as a person, like I get that you're managing me and my talents at work, and I get that you appreciate that, or at least you should. If you don't care about me as a person, I'm not going to care about you as a leader. And by the way, the ripple effect is I'm not going to care about the business or our customers either, right? So this idea of empathy. Now, empathy is different than sympathy, right? So Chris, if I'm being sympathetic to you, I go, oh, you poor thing. I'm like, I'm so sorry for your loss. Mm-hmm. Thank you, I guess. It doesn't take you anywhere, right? The idea of, look, empathy is, I've been there, maybe not exactly where you are, but I'm going to crawl down and be in this space with you. And I'm going to choose to be there with you. Now, those of you that are listening, you're going to say, look, I'm not a therapist. I can't write a prescription. I mean, I want to help. And yet, how do I help if I don't have training in that area? And it's very simple. Your employees, your coworkers, they know you don't have those degrees. I mean, obviously, right? All they want you to do is one thing. They want you to listen. If you can just say, hey, look, I know you're going through some tough times. I've noticed that what can I do to help? And then just listen and let people have that ally and talk it out and unburden themselves. I mean, you've had that experience, haven't you, Chris?
Yeah, definitely. And I think part of one of the big leaps that I took was sharing my own story and journey, which I've shared on the show many times, in the struggle with my own anxiety and panic attacks, etc. And what I found by sharing my story and my journey with my team, it opened up and unlocked a whole new level of, trust, creating that psychological safety. And all of a sudden I had, employees and team members say, I'm also struggling. I'm feeling the same way. Or, you know what, Chris, I'm not feeling great. Can I have a day off? Of course you can. Or even me, he literally, a few weeks ago, I came in and I was really, really overwhelmed. And I said, look, guys, I know we've got 3 or 4 podcasts scheduled today, and I just need a break. I'm sorry. And they stepped up and they jumped in and they was like, no worries. We got it. Right. And so that's been a game changer, absolute game changer.
The word you used, and it's so interesting. You said, when I told my story, engagement went up and trust went up. Because so many of your employees, and I tell your story, and I may probably embellish it a little bit. You really are a superhero in this story, Chris. The point is what I love about your story is when your employees came up and said, me too.
Yes, basically. Yeah.
I have felt that way. So now when you've got that trust and you've got that deeper relationship, when you came in and said, hey, I need a break, of course they stepped up. Why? Because you cared about them enough to share your story. They care enough about you to step in and say, I can help. And see, that's the beautiful part. I love when you said it created psychological safety, and yes, it did. What you've done, though, is you've raised the bar to emotional safety. Psychological safety is great. My voice is heard. My opinion matters. Important, no question. When you share your story about anxiety and mental health, that's emotional safety. And emotional safety is, I can exhale. It's going to be okay. All is well.
Yeah. And for many of us, for me, it was always around, it took me my entire life to finally talk about it. And it's all of those fears, right? Oh, is my team going to think less of me? Is my wife going to think less of me? My friends, are my LinkedIn followers going to think less of me? Yeah, that sounds silly, but it's also true. Like I remember when we first did our show, we were talking about my journey. I was like, what are my followers going to think? How silly is that, right? To think that like, but that's how we are. Right? We all wired that way. And as you mentioned, I like to see myself as a high performer, and I don't want to show any weakness as a high performer. But what I realized from speaking to you and, you know, nearly 500 leaders is actually some of the most, you know, successful top performers that struggle the most. actually.
And by the way, Chris, that's why we admire them. You know, you make a list of the people you most admire in your life, and, you know, you might have Nelson Mandela on the list, or Winston Churchill, or maybe your great grandfather that, you know, came to England with 10 cents in his pocket and built whatever. The people we admire the most aren't the people that never struggled. We never put somebody on the list that said, you know, when he turned 20, he inherited $20 million and never looked back. Yeah, I never had a problem, just sailed through life. We don't admire those people.
It's so true, because you said last time we spoke, you said, Chris, who are, you asked me who are free people. And I said, well, the first one I said was my mum.
Yeah.
And you said, why? And I said, well, she raised 4 kids as a single parent whilst, you know, having a job and also battling with our own battle with anxiety and depression, and she raised 4 kids. I'm like, you're a superhero. Like, it doesn't even make sense. And now when we all left, she was like, well, we've got 4 spare rooms. Let me foster kids. You know, she's an angel. But you're right. I admire her not because it was all easy. I admire her because of the incredible adversity she had overcome.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. So, you know, we love hearing these stories. And at some point, you know, I'm going to get to meet your mom and it's going to be great, right? And because I know her story.
It's true. Yeah.
So why is it that now everything has to be perfect? Your Instagram page is amazing. Every holiday you take is ridiculous, right? Yeah, you speak 5 languages. Your children are all beautiful. You know, why is it that we are so afraid now to ever talk about failure? Why is that, Chris?
I do think part of it is social media. You know, like there's this, you know, everyone wants to project the best version of themselves, and it causes a false sense of reality, right? You know, how often do you go on someone's Instagram or LinkedIn and they go, oh, I've had a terrible day. I failed at all these things. Let me imagine if you did a post for every mistake you made. Yeah. There'd be a lot of posts, a lot more than the exciting ones. But also it makes us feel good, right? I think I do think it releases dopamine and psychologically it makes you feel better when you're sharing those good moments as well. Yeah,
it does, and yet I think we've become so addicted.
Yeah, it's an addiction.
How many likes did I get? You know, we on our podcast, Anxiety at Work, and I'd encourage you to listen if you're tuning in.
Bruno, drop it in the chat, Bruno.
Yeah, there you go.
Drop a link in the chat.
You know, it's so funny because, you know, I love that your producer's name is Bruno, because in my family, we don't talk about Bruno. No. We don't talk about. That's a Disney reference. For those of you
anyway, God. I know the reference. I've got a 3-year-old daughter.
Thank you.
Comment in the chat if you got that reference. Yeah, I got it. Don't worry. Yeah.
So here's the thing. We were talking to this guy. He works with, he's actually Canadian from Montreal, living in Boston, dealing with first responders and doing a lot of counseling. You know, first responders have a lot of physical, they get injured. They'll take a lot of over-the-counter drugs and so on, and they can get addicted. And so he deals with addiction, specifically with first responders. And it's so funny. He says, you know, I'll talk to people and they'll say, I don't understand addiction. I don't have any addictions. And he says, really? Give me your phone for 2 months.
See what happens.
And they go, no, he says, everybody has an addiction. So back to what we were talking about, everybody has failed, right? And in fact, we admire the people that have failed. You know, if you're an American and you make these lists, Abraham Lincoln makes a lot of lists. Well, Abraham Lincoln is a story of tremendous failure until he finally gets elected president. And we admire his grit, and then he doesn't give up. So I was talking to a counselor and reading some of her work and listening to her podcast. And she said, it's really interesting that failure when we fail, we react in generally three ways. And I'd love your take on this, Chris. First reaction that a lot of people has is blame, anger, and depression. Why me? Not my fault. Curl up in a ball. The second one is, okay, this horrible thing, I'm just going to gut it out. I'm going to survive. And if I can survive tomorrow and enough tomorrows, with any kind of luck, somewhere down the road, we'll have a brighter day. She said the third one, though, is the one that we are made for. And I love that she said that we're built for. And that is to say, why is this happening? What can I learn? And then how will this make me stronger? You know, our muscles are made to be stressed. If we don't stress our muscles, we lose them. She said, we as humans, we are built to be stressed. We are problem-solving machines. Well, I was coaching a dear friend of mine who lost his job, and it was a stupid, I mean, it was something never should have happened, and it was huge blow, like huge. So we're going through this, and he said, you know, I almost think those are the stages of grief. Like your first reaction when something terrible happens is why me, and you get angry. Second is, how can I just survive? The third stage, though, is what we're built for. And look at your journey with anxiety. Think of how much you learned, and then sharing how it helped other people learn. And now when your staff looks at you, you are more than because of your failures.
Yeah. It's
fascinating, isn't it?
It's so interesting how you kind of, I flipped it to, you know, that vulnerability is almost a superpower, because it breaks down boundaries and just people are like, oh, okay, you know, I can really chat. I can chat with Chris. I can share. I can be vulnerable, and it just is so refreshing to be able to do that.
And a quick story about that. So, you know, I did this thing for a really amazing tech company out on the West Coast. We'll call them Microsoft, because you know that's who it was. Anyway, this top leader, we did this great retreat, and then she's one of these leaders. I'm telling you, Chris, if you ever get to meet her, and you should have her. Actually, I'll give you her name. I will not use her name. I haven't gotten permission yet. You get the drill. Anyway, if you were to talk to her, you'd go, man, that is the most put together leader I have ever met. Like even her voice just calmed people down. I mean, I talked to her team, like she was off and she was coming in and I said, hey, is it just me? Or when she talks, do you just kind of go, ah? They go, yeah, that's like her superpower. Well, we start talking about anxiety in the workplace. And she says, you know, Sunday nights, I get the Sunday night ickies, she calls it. And they get so bad that my sister and I have made this dinner club where we come over, it's potluck, and we calm each other down to get ready for the week. And by the way, I've got these meetings coming up where they go through all my numbers. She's head of sales, and her sales group, by the way, does like billions of dollars of business. And I've got to know all the answers. You don't think I'm stressed? Well, so we did a fireside chat, Chris, and she shared her story, obviously on Microsoft Teams, right? The chat box blew up. You know what the words they used to describe her? Courageous. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for giving me permission. She went from being this iconic, unbelievable leader to superstar. You know what? It went so well, Chris. We did another fireside chat with 900 leaders. And again, the chat box was, thank you so much. I've struggled with this for years. So you're right. The superpower is you can go from being a good leader to a great leader, and a great leader to being a superstar, and a superstar to being just off the charts when you share your story. And yet we're so afraid. And then every time somebody shares their story, you go, wow, isn't that great?
No, definitely. I think sometimes people just struggle, leaders, of how much to share.
Right.
I think that's it. Or when is it the right moment? Because you don't want it to come across, you know, not authentic in a way. But I feel like you can feel it and judge it. You know, you can feel when it's right, you know, and you can also feel when you're saying it and it's wrong. In a moment, you don't have to be people know, and you know. So I wouldn't overthink it. So I want to go back to your point about those 3 areas, because we had a conversation months back when you shared that story with me, and I remember having a conversation with my friends also who lost his job, and I did say to him, based on that feedback, you know, I was like, you're built for this. Right. And I say it to myself sometimes when I'm struggling, and I'm like, Chris, you're built for this. And I just say it, you know, to myself, you know, And it's important to understand that we are built for this. It may not feel like it at the time, but you are built for this. And we've all, if the last 2 years has shown anyone, is that we can go through a lot, and we're very resilient. You know, we're built for this. Yeah. The other thing,
I love that expression. I'm going to make like bumper stickers, you know, and put that, not the sticker kind, the magnetic kind, because, you know, the stickers are, the idea of we're built for this. And when you say that enough, and I love the repetition, right? It comes back to reps, right? Practice. The more you say it and the more you work through it, the better you get. And those problems become opportunities. Those setbacks become just really energizing. And you know, Chris, for whatever reason, I go back to my parents' generation, the greatest generation, that World War II generation. When you think of the innovation that came out of that horror, right? How they built planes and jets and figured stuff out. And they didn't say, hey, why me, curl up in a ball? And they didn't just say, hey, we're going to gut it out. They seized the day and said, hey, there's an opportunity to do something extraordinary. This trauma will produce on the back end extraordinary people, extraordinary results. And a friend of mine gave me this advice when Adrian and I decided we were going to leave very comfortable jobs and go out on our own, and we were terrified. A friend of mine grabbed me and said, hey, enjoy the journey. Wherever it takes you, enjoy the journey. Just take a deep breath every now and again and say, this is amazing. You and I did that in our last coaching session. I said, Chris, 2 years ago, and now here, are you kidding? I mean, the transformation of HR leaders is beyond extraordinary. And there are so many stories like that, and not just companies, people. I'm a better husband. I'm a better father. I'm a better friend. Right?
And that leads me quite nicely onto my next question, is the value of creating rituals of gratitude. Could you share more about that? It's something I've been doing a lot more of after our last conversation.
Yeah. And I love that. You know, our 8th strategy is how to use gratitude. The human mind, you can't hold two emotions at the same time, right? You can't be anxious and be grateful. So what are these routines, rituals, and triggers? I have a ritual with my wife at the end of the day. We say, what are your 3? I've got a gratitude journal. I mean, I'm the apostle of appreciation, so I have like 50, right?
Go on, you got to bring out one of the stones. I
got it right here.
I knew it.
Gratitude stone, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, because it's I'll get a bigger one, bigger stone.
The fact that I know you have one and arm's reach is hilarious.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I literally travel with a pocket full of rocks. Like when you go through security at the airport, you have to put them in. They say they got to know what they're. And I will randomly give a gratitude stone to a flight attendant. I have to tell you a cute one. The guys that collect up all our trash were coming through, and they were coming. I said, hey guys, just a minute. I've got a little something for you. I said, I know that what you do is hard, and you do it whether it's rain, snow, sleet. I want you to know that all those things you do hasn't gone unnoticed, and that I really appreciate it. I've got a little gift for you. And I gave him these little gratitude stones.
I love
Chris, you'd think I'd given him a Fabergé egg.
Yeah. But
now, the thing is, people will say, well, can you do it too much? And you can't. I'm telling you, you can't. Nobody goes home at the end of the day and says, I got too much recognition.
Too much appreciation today.
Yeah. And I know we're at our time, but I want to share with you a very sweet story, very personal to me. It was Saturday morning. It was a few weeks ago, and the grandkids weren't over. I wasn't playing tennis, and my wife and I just had time, just me and her, to chat. And for whatever reason, I said, honey, what are you going to miss most when I'm dead? You know, like the guy always dies before the woman, right? My wife's in great shape. I'm clearly going to die before she does. And she said, she paused. It was really a tender moment. She said, you know, I've actually thought about this. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. So what is it? She goes, I'm going to miss all those little things that you do and say, the thank yous, the gratitude that gives me confidence to do what I do every day as a mom and a grandma. I'm going to miss all those little drips. And see, my point is that we say things and we encourage people and we forget about it. It resonates. Those are deposits that carry people through. And so my project, and Chris, I want you to hold me to this. I'm going to get a blank journal, and I'm going to number 365 days, so that when I'm gone, my wife can take that book and turn to whatever page it is.
Oh, wow.
And it'll say, never forget how much I love you. And I just want to give a shout out to my dad, because my dad taught me that. My mother would walk into a room and he would nudge me and he would say, look at your mom. Isn't she beautiful? Isn't she talented? Aren't we lucky?
Yeah. Well, I feel like that's a great way to end it, Chester. Thank you as always. I appreciate it. Whilst you were saying that, I was also thinking, I wonder how many gratitude stones your wife has. she's got a whole sack. She's like, that's enough. No, I can't carry them anymore. That's enough. Well, listen,
your bag does way more. Trust me, it's always worth it.
Listen, I appreciate you as always. I love your energy. I love everything you do. For everyone listening, make sure you go, if you're not already following on Chester on LinkedIn, make sure you do that. Check out both books that are behind him, Leading with Gratitude, Anxiety at Work. Make sure you grab a copy of that. And also subscribe to the Anxiety at Work podcast. There'll be a link in the chat and the description for that. But apart from that, enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the weekend. And it's a pleasure as always. See you again soon.
Always a privilege. And Bruno, welcome to the team. Glad to have you on board as well.
Thank you very
my
much.
friend.
See you later.
Cheers.
Bye, everyone.